Welcome to the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast, formerly known as Chapters of Motherhood. I'm your host, Veronica Moss, and I've returned with an evolved vision. I'm currently in studio passionately crafting brand new episodes set to officially debut in the spring of 2024. We now focus on promoting spiritual growth in all areas of life, including career, relationships, and mindful parenting. While you're waiting for the new season to kick off, why not revisit some of the classics? We've got your favorite episodes from Chapters of Motherhood lined up for your enjoyment. So sit back, relax, and let the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast lead you on a journey of self-discovery and growth. Stay tuned. Welcome to your renewed spiritual sanctuary, the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast. Chapter 17, #MeTooMom. Time's up. Welcome, everybody, back to Chapters of Motherhood podcast. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. This is a podcast based on my sharing of my motherhood experiences and in hopes that you either can relate or be entertained by the storytelling format. At times, I do have guests, not necessarily experts, but mothers who share their own stories as well. And today's episode is based on several of my own experiences in the workforce in which I have experienced sexual harassment. At times I handled it well, and at times I did not. I also share my one experience of sexual abuse from a doctor that I trusted, and why it took me so long to say anything or talk about it. The first time that I realized that I was being sexually harassed was in 1995. And it happened so slowly that I almost didn't even notice it. I was working in a medical clinic and there was a parking attendant that had just started and he was very flirtatious with all the girls. And so everyone had the same experience and the same story and nobody really cared. He would ask people for money and he would ask people for lunch. Well, not people, women for lunch and for money. And he would walk us, to and from our car, which was fine. But he took that opportunity to, ask for money and lunch. And the first time he told me that, I was in the reception area. I was a registration clerk and I was in the reception area. And he came to me and he's like, "Hey, Veronica, can I hold $1?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, can I hold $1?" And I was like, you want to hold $1? You just want to hold it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just want to hold it." And I thought, well, that's weird. And I thought, well, is this like maybe a magic trick or something? I don't know, right? So I went to my purse and I gave him $1 and he's like, "Thanks." And he starts walking away. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought you said you just wanted to hold it. Now, I was 20 years old. I was very naive. I did not have experience with this. And then that's when some other girls were like, "Veronica, haven't you ever heard that before?" And I was like, no. And they're like, when they say, let me hold $1, they mean give me money. I was like, really? I thought that was so weird. So I was like, okay, well, whatever. And he took off with my $1 and that was it. So after that experience, I knew better. And I had heard, all the same stories that, he would ask girls for money. He would ask them for, lunch. If you were leaving for lunch, he would be like, "Oh, did you bring me anything? Can I have your leftovers? Can you buy me lunch? When you go out to lunch, can you buy me some?" And so all the stories were the same. And there was this other girl that was, young and naive. And one time he approached her and told her, "Hey, I don't have any money. Can you buy me something?" And she felt bad and she felt obligated. And she's like, okay, so she took him to lunch. And I didn't pay much attention to it because, it was none of my business. I didn't care. It just so happened that a year later, I had came back from maternity leave and I knew that this girl had just quit her job. And I thought, okay, whatever, none of my business. And so I came back from maternity leave and before I was pregnant, I was like 103 pounds. I was super skinny. I was like 103 pounds soaking wet. And after having Leah, I was 21 and I was left a little thick. I was 110 pounds. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but I was able to fill up my size 2 pants. So I was a little thick. So when I came back from maternity leave, like I said, the parking attendant would, walk us to the building just to make sure that we were safe. And so he would walk us to the building, chit chat, small talk. And I was walking upstairs and before I could open the door, I just turned back because I felt like someone was watching me. And I saw him practically laying on the stairs, turning his head and peeking out through the corner or over around the corner, watching me walk up. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, no, nothing. I fell, whatever. And he, left. I thought that's so weird. And so I walked in, and that's pretty much when it started, when he started coming to me and saying, oh, Veronica, did you bring me anything for lunch? And I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, well, where are you going to go? Can you bring me something? And I would tell him, well, no, I have a newborn at home. I'm going to go home and feed her. And he's like, oh, well, what if I go home with you? Can you make me something to eat if I go home with you? And I was like, what, are you joking? Like, I have a newborn that I'm going to go home to feed, and I need to eat myself, and I'm married. Like, what's wrong with you? You don't ask that of a married woman. So this was starting to become kind of like the norm, right? It was starting to become normal, and he was always like, asking, for food and for money. And his mom happened to work in the medical records department. And I told him, like, what's wrong with you? I have a husband. I have 2 kids that I'm responsible for. If you're looking for your mom works in medical records. Ask her for money. Ask her for food. I don't understand what you want from me. So this was becoming the norm. And then after a while, he starts telling me, so when are you going to let me holler at you? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm married. This isn't appropriate. And then he started telling me, that I look sexy and that he was wishing that he had a woman like me. And he asked me if I was into black guys. And I told him, you know what? The answer doesn't even matter because I'm married. I'm not interested at all. So I would catch him like staring at me from the bottom of the stairs and, saying that I'm sexy, wanting to know if I would let him holler at me and if I was interested. And I kept telling him like, look, I'm not interested because I'm married. Okay. So after that, this was going on for a few months. And then he started getting a little angry with me, and he started like, I don't know, talking, smack, talking like, oh, Veronica's a racist because she's not into black guys. And he would do that like in a group setting, like if we were in the lunchroom or the break room or, in front of other people. And I would tell him like, it doesn't matter if I am or if I'm not. I'm married, and I have kids, and you're being inappropriate. And so he would like try to tease me in front of people. And like I said, other girls had the same story, probably not as much as mine, because I was getting mad at that point. And so I started talking shit back to him, and I would tell him like, you're such a broke ass. Like, what are you doing asking women for food, asking women for money? Don't you get paid? Don't you have your mommy here? And so I got into this banter with him where I started talking shit right back to him. And so it was becoming very toxic. And so finally, the last straw happened. Okay, so one day I'm walking through the hallway and I see the podiatrist talking to the parking attendant. And the podiatrist gave me a little nod, like a hello nod. And I gave him the nod back. And I kept walking, and the parking attendant tells the podiatrist, don't say hi to her. And I don't know what he must have responded because I was walking away, so I didn't hear. But he said, don't say hi to her. And the next thing I hear him say is, oh, well, that's the hoe of Downey. And I turned around and I was like, what did you just say? And he's like, what? I didn't say anything. And I'm like, yes, you did. You said something. I asked the podiatrist, like, what did he say? And he immediately said, you know what? I don't want to get involved. I'm not involved in this conversation. And he walked off. And so he left us there arguing between us. And so I got really mad and I told him, you know what? I've had enough. You can't talk to me like this. You can't be saying that in front of doctors. You can't be saying these things in front of other people that work here. And I've had enough. I'm going to report you. And he's like, go ahead and report me. I don't care. And it was just pretty much like he just didn't care. He had been getting away with it for so long. I think at this point, it must have been like a year and a half that he had been getting away with it. And no one said anything. Nobody reported him, that he thought that he was good. And so I was really angry. I went straight to my supervisor and told her about it. She went straight to the branch manager and told her as well. So they pulled me in to have a meeting. And so I told them, my side of the story. I've told them everything that happened. I think they spoke to him that night too. And then they said, okay, we're going to talk to him and we're going to come to a conclusion, tomorrow. So I went home and I told my husband about it. And this was my first husband. And he was very upset. And the first question, well, actually, all 3 of them asked me this. Why didn't you say anything to me sooner? And my response to all 3 of them was, because I thought I was handling it. I thought I was, I had a handle on it. And, clearly I don't, and it's gone out of control, and he's saying these things in front of doctors, and he's saying these things in front of people, and I've had enough, and he can't talk to me like that anymore. So my husband asked me, well, what are they going to do? And I said, I don't know. They told me that they were going to let me know what's going to be next tomorrow. And he said, okay. So the next morning he tells me, you know what? I don't have to go in until later today. Why don't I take Adam to preschool and you go straight to work? And I thought, oh, okay, thanks. So I went to work and I was ready to hear what was going to happen. And before I knew it, I was there maybe 10 to 20 minutes. And I heard a bunch of commotion going on. Something was going on outside. And next thing I know, my supervisor is calling me and saying, hey, you need to report to the branch manager. Your husband's here. He's threatening the parking attendant, and the police has been called. I was like, oh my God, what is going on? So come to find out that my first husband had the plan of taking our son to preschool and immediately going to the work site because he knew there was only one male parking attendant and one female parking attendant. So he knew who to go after. And so he got there and they were exchanging words, and the female parking attendant was my friend. And so she was telling me that, he showed up, they started, getting very loud. They were exchanging words. The parking attendant, male, radioed to her. And so she started calling the police, and they were, she said that she saw them kind of like dancing around, like hopping around, like ready to see who was going to throw the first punch. And so she said right away, I'm calling the police. And so she knew him too. So she's like, I'm calling the police. You need to leave before they get here. And so he got in the car and he left. The police showed up. They took a report. They were talking to him. They were talking to her. They were talking to me. They talked to the branch manager. And the first thing that the branch manager said was, she was so angry. She's like, why did you tell your husband? You should never have told your husband. I told you we were working on this and we were going to settle this. And so my supervisor stood up immediately saying, why wouldn't she tell her husband? I would tell my husband. Like, of course she needs to tell her husband what's going on. And when the police questioned me, I told them I didn't see him here. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was my husband or not. I didn't see him. I mean, it was the truth, actually, because I didn't see him. It sounded very much like him. I'm sure it was him. And it was. Later on, he told me it was. And by the time they called, they were like, oh, no, he's here. He's been at work. So I don't know if they covered for him or they got confused or what, but they couldn't prove that it was my husband that was there. And I wouldn't confirm that it was him either because I didn't see it with my own eyes either. And so anyways, what ended up coming out of that exchange was they decided to transfer him immediately to a different location. And honestly, if that hadn't have happened, if my husband wouldn't have shown up and tried to fist fight this guy, I honestly don't think that they would have done anything about it. I really don't. I think they were just going to sweep it under the rug. But because it happened and there was a police report and, it was a big deal, they had to transfer him. And so it sped things up. But what happened afterwards was something I did not expect. Now, like I said, he had been doing this not to just me. I think with me, it was just worse. But he had been doing this to other girls. That other girl had quit when I was on maternity leave. I don't know if she quit because of that. I'm assuming. I don't know. And other girls had the same stories. But what ended up happening was everybody took a side. A lot of people started blaming me, saying, oh, Veronica, you think you're that good? You think you're that good that he wants you? He says those things to me, and I don't think it's a big deal. Why did you make such a big deal of it? You just ruined his reputation. You just made him get transferred. Why did you do that to him? And so I took a lot of victim blaming. And the whole building was divided. Half of the people were like, it's a good thing that you said something. He shouldn't be treating you or anybody else like that. I'm glad that he's gone. And a lot of other, including the majority are women that were telling me this, saying, you think you're that good. You shouldn't have said anything. He was just being flirtatious. How could you do that to his mom? His mom is still working here. How embarrassing it is for her. And so I took a lot of flack over it because they were just saying that I shouldn't have said anything. I should have kept my mouth shut. I'm not all that good. Or basically like, you shouldn't think that you're that special because he did it to everybody. But it was just enough. Like he escalated to a point where he wasn't just like flirting. He was being mean and he was like spreading rumors and he was getting angry with me. and calling me a racist and calling me a hoe and calling me all kinds of names and, staring at me from the bottom of the stairs. It happened more than once. It happened several times. So that was really unfortunate to see that, other women were accusing me of being in the wrong. And very few men did come up and say, oh, I wish you would have told me. I would have handled it for you, which it wouldn't be their place. I did what I thought was right. At first, I tried handling it on my own. When I realized it was out of control, I went straight to my supervisor and she went straight to the branch manager and they were going to handle it. Now, I wasn't going to hide it from my husband. He needed to know as well. So that was my first experience. Now, my next experience was more harassment over my sex than sexual. And by that, I mean it was more regarding my gender than it was someone trying to have sex with me. So I was 28 and I was starting my real estate/mortgage career. And I had started in my nephew's company. And his company was structured in a way that he wanted to train all new people in mortgages and in the business. And because of the extensive training and tools and lead generation, because he created a lot of leads as well, the commission split was 50-50. And if you know anything about this business, the real estate business and mortgage business, 50-50, it's a big split for a commission. So, but it was justified because he was doing a lot of training. He was giving us a lot of tools. He was doing lead generation. And he was, in other words, as soon as one lead would come in, it would go to one loan officer, then to the other, round robin, right? So it was justified. And I didn't know anything. So for me, it was perfect. Okay, I'll give you 50% of my commission if you train me. So because I was his aunt, he had his manager train me. And the manager did put in a lot of time, a lot of effort and energy into training me. And I did need that help. And he did give up a Saturday to meet with a client of mine and help me close the deals. So he did help me out a lot and he helped me close my first 3 deals. After that, I told him, you know what? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think I'm good to go now on my own now and I'm good. And he agreed. He's like, yeah, you know what you're doing. So that was it. So for my first 3 deals, he did help me out. So after that, I had landed a really good strategic partner. It was 3 of them. They were all real estate agents. And they were feeding me a lot of leads. So I didn't even need their lead generation anymore because I was getting a lot of deals on my own. I was getting 12 a month. So when the manager realized that I was doing really well and that I had this strategic partner that was feeding me a lot of leads, he started getting more involved, saying, hey, you're doing a great job. How's it going? Oh, you got this guy. And he happened to come in one day and it happened to be that he was my fiance's cousin. And this was back in 2003, 2004. And it was my fiance's cousin. And so we're family. And he was in the business and he was really good communicating, really friendly. And so he was getting a lot of leads, a lot of potential clients. And so he trusted me with them. Well, when the manager realized it, he started wanting to get involved again and tell me, oh, let me help you with this. Let me help you with that. And I would tell him, oh, you know what? I'm good. I don't need the help. Well, he started insisting that if he was going to help me, I needed to give him 25% of my commission. So that would mean that the company's already taking 50%. He wants 25. I'm going to be left with 25% for my work. And I told him, no, it's not necessary. I got this. I know what I'm doing now. But he got greedy and he saw that I was doing really well. And he decided that he was going to start calling my real estate agent and telling him, Veronica's very inexperienced. She doesn't know what she's doing. You need somebody who's more experienced because she's not at the level that you are. Now, we were both starting at the same time. He was just really good at communicating and really good at finding clients. But the manager was talking bad about me to him. And he would call me and tell me like, hey, who is this guy? Why is he calling me and telling me that you're neglecting my files, that you don't know what you're doing? And I would tell him, that's not true. I'm on top of everything. Talk to your own client. Like they know that I'm doing a good job for them. And the processors are taking care of the file and they'll let me know if I need to do anything. So I don't know why he's saying that. So I had a conversation with the manager saying, hey, I don't appreciate you calling him. He's family. I need you to know that he's family, and I don't appreciate you calling him. That is my strategic partner, and you need to respect that. And so he kind of backed off a little bit. So then I was going to go on vacation. We were going to go on a cruise. And I told the junior processor, which was also my nephew, different nephew, his brother of the CEO. And I told him, hey, I need you to take care of my files. Here's all my information. I'm going to go on a cruise, so I'm not going to be able to talk. This was back in like 2004. So the cell phone reception wasn't the same as it is today. And once you're out to sea, there is no communication until you land somewhere. And I was going on a Caribbean cruise, so I wasn't going to be able to call. Like I said, the reception was not the same on cell phones back then as it is today. So I was not going to be in communication for 5 days with them. So I gave him all my files and I told him, this is where we're at. Please take care of everything. I'll give you a bonus for helping me. And he was like, yeah, that's great. That's fine. Well, the branch manager decided to take advantage of the situation that I was out on vacation and took all my files off of the junior processor's desk and decided to start working on them, and which they were already done. They were just going through the process. But then he calls my real estate agent and tells him, oh, Veronica is so inexperienced. She went on vacation. She's not doing anything for your files. They're being left alone. Thank goodness that I'm still here and I'm working on them for you. I don't know what she's doing taking a vacation right now. And basically took over the minute that I left. So 5 days later, when I come back and I ask, my junior, hey, how's it going? He tells me, oh, the manager took all your files away from me and just started working on them. And I told him that I was handling them, but he said that he was going to take care of it. So when that happened, it was obvious. He was trying to undermine me and he was trying to take away my strategic partner because he was feeding me so many leads and I was becoming pretty successful. And I don't know, I guess he didn't like it. By the way, I was also the only female loan officer in the company. So it was obvious why he was doing this to me because everybody that they hired was brand new, but I was the only female at the time. And like I said, the real estate agent was family. And so he told me what was going on. He told me how he saw it. He saw right through him. He's like, he's just trying to undermine you. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with your company, but I'm starting to lose faith in both of you because he had gone into his head already and he didn't feel comfortable with him either. And so finally, in the end, it came to a head. I went in there. I was talking to him, telling him, you shouldn't have done that. I don't need your help anymore. I'm doing fine. This is family. I don't know why you're getting involved. Why did you take it off of my nephew's desk? The CEO is my other nephew. What is going on with you? And so I went to my nephew and I told him, hey, what is going on with him? Like, yeah, I needed his help in the beginning. We all do. That is his job. That is his job. He doesn't get to get paid extra from my accounts for doing his job. And by that time, he had gotten in his ear too, saying, oh, she's inexperienced. She doesn't deserve somebody at that level. I'm the good person to do this for him because he's at a high level and he needs a high-ranking loan officer to take care of his deals and to take care of him. And so my nephew felt in the middle of it and thought, well, and he was a CEO. And I don't know what or why, but he started kind of siding with him. And he told me the same thing. He's like, oh, Veronica, you're so new. You can get more strategic partners. You need to leave this one to the branch manager because he's more experienced. He knows how to take care of things. And I was telling him, what are you talking about? Like, the real estate agent isn't even concerned with that. He's putting it into his head and he's undermining me. And finally, I got so mad and I said, you know what? This is sexual harassment because I'm the only female loan officer. I don't see him doing any of that to any of the male loan officers. And when I said that, he got super upset and said, you know what? It's fine. Because I had told him that I was going to quit. And he said, you know what? That's fine. You can have 100% of your loans when they close. I don't want anything to come to the company. You can keep it all. If your strategic partner wants to go with you, if your real estate agent wants to go with you, or if he wants to stay, that's up to him. I'm not getting involved anymore. And basically, we left in bad blood, which was weird because, he's my nephew. And so we split. And at that point, the real estate agent just said, you know what? This is too weird for me. I don't trust him. He told me a lot about you that I'm not sure that I should trust either now. So instead of like going with you or him or anybody else, I'm just going to have my own wife learn this process and I'm going to have all the loans go through her. And that's what he did, which was, in the end, like I said, we were family. So in the end, I thought that is a good deal for them because they should be husband and wife partnership because that's what I had going on. And I thought, you know what, that's fine. I get it. I understand. I just need you to know that everything that he said wasn't true because I have other real estate agents, strategic partners that I'm taking care of. Now, later on, I found out that this branch manager eventually did start doing this to other people, including males. He tried doing that to the women because the company grew and he ended up getting like 3 branches. And so there were more women loan officers. And he tried doing that to a couple of women loan officers, try to take away their deals or make them give up a portion of their commission so that he can train them. And he did it to one male loan officer. And when that one male loan officer complained, that's when suddenly they listened and said, hey, you can't be doing this. You can't be charging people extra. That's your job. You're supposed to teach them and train them. And you can't take away somebody's strategic partner. You can't do that. And so anyways, later on, I found out, this was a family business. So a lot of my family worked there. So that's how I found out. So I left there and went to a different company, and I was very successful in what I was doing. And then I started doing it on my own, like out of home. And after a while in 2007 or the beginning of 2007, I decided that, you know what, I need to be in a company environment again, in a team environment again, because times are changing. And I needed that office teamwork environment. So I went back to my nephew, who at that point had 3 new branches. And so I started working there, and it wasn't a problem. This time was a lot better. But again, I was the only female loan officer in that office, in that branch. There were more female loan officers in other branches, but in that particular one, in the Orange County particular office, I was the only female, which it wasn't a problem. Everybody was very respectful. And there was this one particular loan officer, male loan officer, that was very Christian and tried to be very respectful. But we were teamed up. It was a team of us of 4. And for some reason, I don't know, it was obvious he had a little bit of a crush on me. And he knew that I was married. And so one day he tells me, oh, Veronica, I really like the way that you dress. Oh, no disrespect. I know that you're married. I just wanted to say that I like the way you dress. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then a couple days later, he was like, oh, Veronica, I really like when you have your hair curly like that. Oh, I know you're married. I know. And I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I just really like that your hair is curly today. And so I would be like, oh, okay, thank you. So it was just, in the beginning, it was very innocent compliments. And I didn't mind them. I'd worked for so long. There's men that did compliment me very few times because they understood that I was married and they didn't want to make me uncomfortable. And that's what I felt that he was doing as well. It was never inappropriate until one time, I don't know, it was cold, raining or something. And I was wearing a skirt suit and some boots, and I was wearing some stockings that looked kind of like fishnet stockings. They weren't fishnet stockings, but they looked it, but they were nylons. And I had this purse that had like a black tassel on it that used to hang from it. And so anyways, I walk into the building and he's there waiting at the elevator, and we walk in and I'm like, oh, hi, good morning. And he looks at me and we get into the elevator. And in the elevator, he starts telling me, Veronica, I know that you're a married woman, but I don't think you should be dressing the way that you do because sometimes you dress very sexy. And that purse, that tassel, it reminds me of like one of those whips. And I think you're just sending the wrong message to some men and you're being very provocative. And I looked at him and I'm like, excuse me? First of all, my own daddy doesn't tell me how to dress. My own husband doesn't tell me how to dress. How dare you come to me and try to tell me that I'm seducing you? Like, are you serious? And I got really angry, and he had never seen me like that. And he goes, oh, no. He shrunk down again. He's like, oh, no, Veronica, that's not what I mean. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I know that you're married. I know that you have a father. I don't mean to disrespect you. I'm just saying, I'm a Christian man, and, sometimes I have impure thoughts. I'm like, are you seriously blaming me for your impure thoughts? And at that point, the elevator doors open, and I walked out so mad. And I happened to run into another team member, another colleague, and he's like, hi, good morning. I was like, good morning. And he's like, whoa, what's going on? What happened? And the guy ends up telling him like, oh, it's just, it's my fault. I said something that I shouldn't have said to her. And I'm like, don't be going around talking about this. And so he told him everything. And so this other guy tells him, hey, you can't be saying this to her. Like you can't be blaming somebody else for the way that you're feeling. And so that kind of happened. And it wasn't so much sexual harassment as it was blaming on his point, where he's like, oh, I'm a Christian man and you're making me have impure thoughts. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that's up to you. Like, don't be bringing your shame of whatever it is that you're feeling onto me, and I'm still dressing very professional. I was a very good looking woman, especially in a suit. I hate to sound conceited because I know it sounds very conceited, but I was looking really good and I got a lot of attention. Not that I wanted it, I just did. And on top of that, like I said, I was the only female loan officer. So that also brought on an attraction to some. But nobody ever really crossed the line until he said that, and it really bothered me. And so at that point, everybody was like, oh, okay, no compliments to you. And it was fine because I'm not fishing for compliments. I was married at the time, so I'm not looking for a husband or, an affair or anything like that, or a office romance. I'm not looking for any of that. I'm looking to make money. I'm looking to support my family. So at that point, it was like, I don't need compliments. It's okay. Now, my next story, I know I mentioned it in one of my previous podcast episodes. I think it was Single Mom Part 1. And this happens to be regarding as soon as I left my second ex-husband and I took the ring off of my finger in another company that I was working in. It was commercial rentals. I had mentioned that I had left my ex-husband, my second ex-husband, and I had taken off my ring, and the supervisor noticed it. And he looked me up on MySpace and he started making contact and started asking me, hey, I noticed that when you first started working here, you were wearing a wedding ring. And lately I've noticed that you're not wearing a wedding ring. What's going on? And that's how he sent me a message on MySpace. And I was like, okay. It was really weird, right? So I just replied, yeah, I just separated from my husband this past week or whatever. That was pretty much it. But then he started asking me like, oh, okay, I know that you just got out of a relationship. I know that you just got divorced or whatever. And he was like, why don't you come out with a bunch of us? Now, the first time that he asked me come out with a bunch of us, I was like, oh, okay. And there was like some type of happy hour that everybody was getting together for on a Friday or whatever. And it happened to be that I didn't have the kids that day. And so I went with, a couple of girlfriends that I had made there at the job. And so we all went and it was fine. Everything was good. We all hung out. It was pretty fun. And then again, I guess Super Bowl was coming up and he's like, oh, why don't you come over for Super Bowl? I'm going to have a party. At first I had said, I don't know, I'll think about it. And then on the day of Super Bowl, I was like, okay, well, I got nothing else to do. And there is a Super Bowl party going on. So I'll go to his. And so I called him and I said, okay, I'm coming over. Like, what's the address? And he gives me the address and I show up and it's just him. And I thought, well, I thought you said that you were having a Super Bowl party. Where is everybody? And he's like, oh, yeah, we're all over here at, this guy that we work with apartment. So we go to our other colleague's apartment and it's just him and his girlfriend. And I was like, I thought there was a party. And they're like, oh, no, it's just us. Let's just go get some Chinese food. And I'm like, Chinese food? I thought we were going to watch the Super Bowl. So anyways, so it kind of felt like a double date, so it kind of felt weird to me. And he kind of made his intentions known at that point. I was like, oh, you know what? I just separated from my husband. I'm not really interested. I'm not really looking for anything. And he's like, oh, no, that's cool. If you just want to be friends, we can be friends. We can go, hang out and do things. And I thought, okay. And so again, another time, everybody was going to happy hour and I went and everybody was there. And then later on, like a few weeks later, he tells me, we're all going to San Francisco. Do you want to go? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. I don't think I should go. But it happened to be that I didn't have the kids that weekend. And so I said, okay, well, if there's going to be a group going, then I'll go. And again, it was just me and him and his friend and his girlfriend. So it was just us. And I felt really weird. And I'm like, I don't want to go if it's just us. And he's like, oh, no, we're going to meet all of my friends up in San Francisco because he was from San Francisco. And so we went on this road trip and, he tried here and there. And I kept telling him, like, I'm really not interested. This isn't, what I'm looking for. I thought we were going to be friends and hang out and, I'll pay my own way. I don't need you to pay for anything. And so on our way back from San Francisco, he starts asking me questions like, oh, so what are you interested in? Like what type of guys are you into? And I told him, well, I'm not really interested in anything right now. I just got out of my second marriage. I've never been on my own before. I was married when I was 18 and I got into my second relationship immediately. And now I'm getting a divorce. And so I'm not really interested or looking for anybody. And he's like, well, are you into this type of guy? Are you into that type of guy? And I was like, it doesn't really matter. And then he starts telling me, well, women usually have orgasms either by clitoris stimulation or vaginal. In which do you have orgasms with? And I looked at him, I'm like, are you being serious right now? This is such an inappropriate conversation. I'm not comfortable talking about that. We work together, and this isn't a conversation that I just have out in the open with people. And he's like, oh, okay, no, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So that was the San Francisco trip coming back. And I don't know why I kept accepting his, invitations like to hang out and to be friends. But at the time, it's just like, I didn't really have anybody at the moment. So as far as like friends, everybody was busy doing their own thing. And it happened to be when I didn't have the kids, he would invite me. I don't know if he knew this or what, but he would invite me to places. So then it was Valentine's Day coming up and he's like, oh, we're all going to do some type of event. And first I went around asking everybody, are you going to this event? And they said, yeah. I thought, okay, well, if you guys are going to this event, somebody was DJing or something. And so I said, okay, if everybody's going to go, then I'll go ahead and go. Then he starts telling me like, oh, I need you to bring a white teddy or white underwear and bra so that we can take pictures. And so-and-so's girlfriend's also taking pictures. We did this arrangement of, all the girls get to take pictures. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, look, I don't feel comfortable. I told him, I just don't feel comfortable with this. I got to go. I faked a call. Like I had my daughter call me and I told him, I'm like, you know what? My dog, something's wrong with Pookie. She got stepped on and I got to go to Pookie. I got to leave. And so after that, I just didn't trust like going anywhere with him anymore because it was like, you're being weird and I keep telling you that I'm not interested and, you're making me feel uncomfortable. And I didn't report him because he was the supervisor. And on top of that, I ended up getting laid off. It had nothing to do with him. I ended up getting sick. I didn't meet my quota for 2 weeks in a row. And I got let go. At that point, I didn't feel that I got laid off because of anything he did. It just so happened to be what it was. And I didn't report him because I kind of felt stupid for going along to, these trips and these outings and these happy hours and Super Bowl and Valentine's and all that. So I kind of felt stupid for like falling for it. And so I thought, oh, I don't want to report him because they're going to say, well, you shouldn't have gone to these events with him. So at that point, once I got laid off, I was like, you know what, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm gone. I'm never seeing them again. So in 2009, a year later, I found myself in the same position. This was during the recession and I was just a revolved door of jobs. I just kept trying to look for jobs during the time. And I decided to work for a law firm that was doing loan modification. And the lead manager there, another manager, had decided to take a special interest in helping me, get trained and whatever. And he knew that my background was in real estate, specifically in mortgages. And this was during, the whole real estate bubble burst, right? And he tells me, look, there's a bunch of us that were in the real estate business and it looks like it's coming back. And we want to talk about how we can partner up and get back into the business. Your license is still valid, right? And I said, yeah. And he tells me, okay, good. Why don't you meet us? We're meeting at, this restaurant, during lunchtime. Why don't you meet us there? We're all going to be there. And I thought, okay. And I was getting really excited because I thought, oh, good. I get to go back into real estate, what I really like doing. And I was meeting them there. So I show up and yeah, there's a group of people there and they're all eating but the lunch was over. So they were getting up and they were leaving. And I thought, oh no, am I too late? And he's like, oh no, I'll catch you up on everything. Oh, bye guys, everybody can leave. I'll catch her up. And they looked at me confused and they looked at him confused. Like they didn't really understand what was going on, but they left. And I sat down and so he starts telling me, oh, okay. So yeah, we were talking about, how we can get back into the business. But anyways, why don't you tell me about yourself? And then he proceeds to ask me like personal questions like, are you dating anybody? Are you married? Do you have kids? What are your preferences? Do you like this type of food? Do you like that? And I was like, what is going on? I thought we were here talking about, getting back into the real estate. So I would answer his questions and then I would go right back into, okay, so my license is still valid. What is going on with the mortgages? I prefer doing mortgages, but I can do real estate if need be. And he was like, yeah, we'll talk about that later. So this is how I grew up. And so he starts telling me how he grew up and he wanted to know how I grew up. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I'm starting to sound a little familiar. And so lunch was over and I went back and then he tells me, oh, so why don't we get together again tomorrow and we can really talk about, getting back into real estate. And I thought, okay, that sounds great. And this was my first week being there. And I thought, okay, I thought that he was on the up and up. And so I met him at the restaurant and this was like a really romantic restaurant. Like it was lunchtime and the lights were really low. They had candles on the table and it was a romantic restaurant and it was pretty pricey too. And I sat down and he was even asking me if I wanted to have a wine for lunch. And I was like, a glass of wine. And I was like, no, we're working and I'm driving and I don't really drink anyway. So no, thanks. And yeah, again, he's like, was more personal. It felt like a date. And I thought, how did I get myself in this position again? So anyways, after that, he was asking me if I was interested in him. And I told him, you know what, honestly, I don't date people from work. I'm not interested. I don't date people from work. I've been divorced for a year and I'm not really interested in dating right now. And he said, okay, you know what, no problem, no pressure. It's okay. Let's just head back. And then the next week, I had only worked there for 3 weeks. So the next week, my second week there, he came to me. It was a Monday and he's like, oh, hey, I got good news. I spoke to the bosses and I told them that I was interested in dating you and they gave us the green light. It's okay. And I was like, what are you talking about? I told you that I'm not interested in dating. It's like, oh, no. You said that you were worried about, office dating, right? And I go, no, I said I'm not interested in dating anybody from the office. And he tells me, oh, it's okay. We got permission. And then I don't know if it was that day or the next day, he tells me, why don't I take you out to lunch? And honestly, I accepted because I didn't have money. This was during the recession and I didn't really have money to eat. And he liked going to really pricey, good restaurants. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's go out for lunch as long as you know that, this is friendly basis. Well, we went to lunch and we came back. And getting off the elevator, one of the girls, and I'm sure she was interested in him, tells us, oh, you guys are back. You know what? You guys make a really cute couple. And I kind of looked at her and I'm like, okay, but we're not dating. And he turns to me and tells me, oh, no, you don't have to hide it. We already got permission from, so-and-so and so-and-so, the lawyers. And we're okay to date. You can tell them that we're dating. And I looked at him like, oh, but we're not dating. He was like a true sales guy. He did not take no for an answer. And he was insisting that we were dating. And I was telling him we're not dating. Before I knew it, I had other people in the office a few days later ask me oh, so you're dating so-and-so? I'm like, no, I'm not dating him. And then that same girl said, oh, well, if dating him means that you get all his leads, then you should date him. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not getting his leads. He trained me. So on week 2, I started realizing, there was a lot of people that weren't getting paid for working. And I had closed a few deals and I was really looking forward to my check and I hadn't gotten paid yet. I started asking well, when do I get my paycheck? And they said, oh, you've only been here 2 weeks. You're probably going to get it next week. And as I was talking to people, I'm like, I'm not getting paid. They're not getting paid. What's going on? And then they had a meeting and he kept insisting oh, let's go out here. Let's go out there. Right. And I wasn't really interested. But anyways, they had this meeting on my 3rd week that I was there and I hadn't gotten paid. And they were saying, oh, we're going to have to ask that, we're having a bit trouble with, our payroll. Some of you haven't gotten paid. We understand that you guys are sole providers of the house. Some of you are single moms. Some of you are, dads that are the single provider for the house. And, we're going to ask that some people go on furlough for a week or two. And I heard that and I thought, this is bullshit. They're not paying people. They haven't paid people, some people, not even a month. It had been a whole month that they had gone paid. And so when I heard that, he had told me to, he had warned me, listen, they're going to ask for people to go on furlough. This has nothing to do with you. You don't say anything. You're going to get paid. It's okay. Just sit there and listen and don't say anything. So when I started hearing this, I was like so fed up with this guy because he just would not leave me alone. He swore we were dating. He would call me and I wasn't interested. And he was just constantly calling me and asking me out. So anyway, when the meeting happened, I was like the second person that put her hand up and said, you know what, I'll go on furlough. It's okay. And then he tells me, why did you do that? I told you not to say anything. This had nothing to do with you. You'll get paid. And I said, you know what? It's fine. I've only been here 3 weeks. Other people haven't gotten paid in a long time. It's fine. So once I quit there and I quit, I really did quit. It turns out that they didn't pay these people, the people that were working for them. They didn't get paid for months. I don't know why people kept going back. I was only there 3 weeks because I thought that I was still going to get paid for the first 2 weeks. And I thought I was just 1 week behind. But once I realized like more people weren't getting paid, I decided I was quitting. So after that, I just kept ignoring all his calls and I didn't have to deal with him anymore. And that was it. I just told him like, I'm not interested. I told you I wasn't interested. We weren't dating. That's it. So jump all the way to 2012. I believe I also mentioned this on a previous episode called Single Mom Part 3. And mortgages and real estate made a comeback. The economy was getting good again. People were buying houses and applying for loans. So it was starting to get good again. So I got this job and I started working for a loan officer. And he was very hyper. He was a nut. I mean, I don't know how else to describe him. He was a nut. So as far as work, he was really demanding of the assistants. So I was his assistant. And he was really demanding. He expected me to work every weekend. He expected me to stay there until 8 o'clock at night. As long as he was there, he wanted his assistants there. Whether or not we had work to do, we just had to appear busy. Well, what ended up happening was that he wanted me to give him a hug in the morning. And, or not even in the morning. He just expected me to give him hugs whenever he wanted hugs, which was morning or at night, after lunch, whatever. He wanted me to hug him. And I would tell him, you know what? I'm not the type that hugs. I don't like hugging. I don't even like hugging my own family members. And he was like, well, I do like hugs, so give me a hug. And he would get mad when I would hug him and then tap him on the shoulder to signify that the hug was over. He would tell me, don't do that to me. Don't signify that the hug is over. It's over when I let go. And I was like, what is wrong with you? I don't like hugging. And so that would happen. Then he one night tells me, oh, hey, listen, I want to talk to you about a certain case or whatever, a certain client. And we're going to talk about it over dinner. And this was already like 8 o'clock. And I had only been working there maybe a week. I think it was my first week. And he tells me, we're going to talk about it over dinner. So meet me over at Macaroni Grill. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and at first I said, okay. And then I thought about it. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? I got to go home to my kids. Like, I got to go home to my boyfriend. At the time I was still, I wasn't married yet, but I was living with Will. I got down. I told him, you know what? I can't sit here and have lunch with you. Whatever we're going to talk about, I'm sure we can talk about tomorrow. I have to get home. And he got really angry with me. He's like, how could you do that to me? Do you know what it feels like to go into the restaurant expecting to have dinner with somebody and then you leave? Like, I felt so embarrassed. And, why didn't you tell me from the very beginning? And I told him, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have said something from the very beginning. And he's like, I don't like eating alone. So I just wanted you to go out to eat with me because I don't want to eat alone and it's late. And by the time I get home, my wife's not going to have anything for me to eat. So I just wanted to have a nice dinner. So he made me feel guilty about that. And I thought, oh man, I'm so sorry. And I felt guilty about it. So the next week he was like, let's go to lunch. Just like that. Like, he didn't ask me, like, do you have plans or anything? He said, let's go to lunch. And I'm like, okay, is the other assistant coming with us? And he asked her and she's like, no, I don't want to go. And so he's like, no, she's not going. So you're coming with me because I don't want to eat alone. So I went to lunch with him. And at first he didn't talk about anything inappropriate. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. And every now and again, he would take us out as a team to celebrate our wins and to celebrate, our volume. So I didn't really see anything wrong with it. But the thing that was bothering me were the hugs and the fact that he wanted me to go out to dinner with him. And it just was to a point where it was just, it was very uncomfortable. And I would tell him, like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this. And he would have me go into his office so he could just talk. And it just felt it felt like he was trying to groom me, is what it felt like. Okay, we're going to be friends, and I just don't want to eat alone, and I want you to come with me. And it was weird, and I wasn't liking the way it was feeling, and it was just getting to the point where he was just trying to control my every move. And one time I told him, you know, I got to go home to my kids. Like, we're not doing anything. It's already 8:30. It's almost 9. We're not doing anything, and I got to go home to my kids. I'm not even going to be able to see my daughter because she's going to be asleep. And I left, and he would call me, like right after I leave, he'd call me on the phone to yell at me and tell me, what is you going home to your kids going to help me? How is that going to help me? And I was like, you're crazy. Like, you're crazy. I can't believe that he was getting so crazy. So I had it. I had worked with him for 5 months, and I had it because it felt very wrong to me. And I went to the branch manager and I told him, look, he wants me to hug him. He doesn't want me to tell him that the hug is over. He wants me to go to dinner with him. He wants me to go to lunch with him. And, you know, it may not sound bad, but I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want to be hugging him. I'm not comfortable with it. So after 5 months, it just got to a point where I just couldn't take it. And I asked for a transfer, and I did. I got a transfer. And the girl that replaced me, later on, I found out that they were having some issues too. I don't exactly know what the issues were, but she ended up quitting him too because she just couldn't take him anymore either. So those were my experiences as far as sexual harassment on the workplace, or in the workplace, that is. Some of them are pretty bad. Some of them kind of sound like not so bad. Some of them just didn't take no, I'm not dating you for an answer. I can't say that I always handled them correctly, but I handled them the way that I thought was right for me at the moment or at the time. Now, this is the first time that I'm ever going to talk about this sexual abuse from a doctor. And the reason is because I didn't realize that it had happened to me until last year, actually. Until it made news or headlines regarding the USA gymnastics doctor, Dr. Nassar, when they started going to court and they started hearing the victims, or I started hearing the victims. I didn't know, I didn't realize. And then when I started hearing the victims say their story, it sounded so familiar. And I thought, oh my God, that happened to me. And I didn't know it. I don't know if you're familiar with the USA gymnastics, Dr. Nassar. He was sexually abusing all these underage gymnasts, all these underage girls. And their stories were, one of the stories was that he even sexually molested a girl with her own mother in the room. Her own mother was at her shoulder. She was laying down, and the doctor was molesting her. And she had a sprained ankle, and he was still molesting her vaginally. And there's countless other stories. There's just so many. But anyway, when I heard her story, I thought, oh my God, that happened to me and I didn't know it. So back to 1992, when I was 17 and pregnant with my son, it was my first pregnancy and it was my first experience with an OBGYN. And my mom took me to the doctor and she told me what was going to happen. She, at this point, we already knew that I was pregnant. I was already, I think I must have been about 4 months or so, 4 months along. And it was my first time going to see the doctor. And I had my dad's insurance, and my mom, my dad pretty much told her, you have to take her to this appointment. You have to. So she took me to the appointment and she explained to me, okay, this is your first experience seeing an OBGYN. And this is what he's going to do. He's going to examine you vaginally. And so she explained it to me. So we went to the appointment. She was there. The doctor had the nurse in there, did the exam. Everything was fine. And so my mom went to the appointment for the first time only. After that, I went on my own. Well, on my own, he would check me vaginally every single time that I went in for a checkup. And the nurse was not in the room. And I didn't even notice that he wasn't putting on gloves. And I didn't know exactly what to expect or what he was feeling or what he was doing. I just knew that he was checking something. And so every single time, every single appointment that I had, he was giving me a vaginal exam and there was never a nurse. And I didn't notice that he wasn't putting on gloves. Well, in that year, a movie called The Hand That Rocks the Cradle was out. And I remember watching the movie and I remember thinking, oh, that doctor that got in trouble for molesting his patient kind of did the same thing. He wasn't wearing gloves, right? And to me, it kind of looked familiar, but I thought, oh, but my doctor's not acting all creepy and getting off and doing that creepy thing. He's just checking me. And it also happened to be that it was like some Dateline that I had watched that was talking about, medical professionals need to be wearing gloves in order to protect themselves and to protect their patients against any like HIV or any type of like transference, things like that. So in order to not transfer diseases back and forth to either the patient or the patient to the nursing staff or doctor. And so when I saw the movie and I saw the Dateline special and I went to go get a blood test, and the girl, at the time, they just weren't mandatory wearing gloves at the time. I don't know why. But one of the girls that was taking my blood, she didn't put on gloves. And I'm like, aren't you supposed to be wearing gloves? And she's like, well, that really protects you more than it protects me. And I told her, well, I want you to wear gloves because I just saw this special and you're supposed to be wearing gloves. And so she did. And then I went to go see my doctor about like a week or two later. And he's setting me up to check me. And I told him, hey, aren't you supposed to have a nurse in here? Like, isn't somebody else supposed to be in here with you? And he's like, oh, no, they're very busy. They're very busy. They're doing other things and, they're busy. And I said, aren't you supposed to be wearing gloves? And he said, you know what? Hold on. Let me make sure that somebody's free. And at that point, I realized that I think he felt maybe embarrassed that I knew these things, right? And I felt kind of weird, like telling him or asking him because I was 17. I was 17 and I didn't know. And I thought, oh, maybe I just embarrassed him, poor thing. And so he called a nurse in and the nurse kind of was like a little confused. And so she came in and she set up a tray. And then I was like a little confused, like, where did that tray come from? Why are you like, what's all this stuff? And he put on gloves and he like checked me and put, the Q-tip and whatever and, did a culture and all that. And I was confused by it because I thought, oh, he did that the very first visit and he hadn't done it any other visit. And now that the nurse is here, he's doing that. And so to me, I was just so young, so naive. I didn't know what was going on. And I knew it was different, but I didn't know why. So after that, I came in for another visit and he didn't check me this time. And he's like, oh, no, I don't need to check you this time. And he starts telling me that he lost privileges at the hospital that he was going to deliver me at if I wanted to switch. And I told him, well, no, I really want to go to my hospital. That's the hospital that I want to go to. And that was the last time that I saw him because I had gone into labor at 36 weeks. And at that appointment, he had told me, you're going to be coming in every week until you deliver. And I said, okay. But I had gone into labor, or not exactly labor. My water broke. And so I had to deliver my son at 36 weeks. So that was my first experience with, an OBGYN. Now, the next time that I got pregnant with Leah, I went into the doctor, the very first exam, they did a vaginal exam, and then that was it. And then I didn't get checked again. And I would ask them, like, aren't you going to check me? And they said, no. And they would look at me a little weird, like, no, we don't need to check you. Are you having a problem? And I said, no, I'm not having a problem. They're like, then we don't need to check you. If you're having a problem, if you're having, discharge, if you think you're bleeding, if you think this or that, let us know and we'll check you. But if you're not having any of that going on, then we don't need to check you. And I thought, oh, okay, that's good. And then when I got pregnant with Sophia, same thing. Like, aren't you going to check me? And I started getting mad thinking like, why aren't they checking me? When I was pregnant with Adam, they would check me every single time to make sure everything was okay. And then I thought, well, maybe because I was 17 and they thought that I was high risk, maybe that's why they're checking me. But then they also told me that I was high risk with Sophia because of my age, but they're not checking me. So I thought it was weird, right? Same thing when I got pregnant with Emily and with Grace. They didn't check me. And I thought that is so weird that they don't check me. Maybe they don't do that anymore, I thought to myself. Until I saw the trial and the witnesses speak against Dr. Nassar. And that's when I realized, oh my God, that happened to me when I was 17 and I didn't know. Even now, I talk about it and I think, well, is that true? Like, did that really happen? Or am I trying to Me Too this? And no, because for the same reason that I didn't get checked with any other pregnancy. And when I did, a nurse was there and they would wear gloves and he didn't. In the very beginning, the very first one, he did have a nurse. He did have a tray. He did put on gloves. In every other one until I asked, he didn't. He didn't have anybody in the room with me. He wasn't putting on gloves. I don't know what he was checking for. I don't know what the difference was. I know that he was up there doing something. I thought he was checking the cervix. I thought he was checking the baby. I was 17 years old. I didn't know. I didn't have anybody in there with me. And I feel weird talking about it for the first time because my mom listens to the podcast. My daughter listens to the podcast. My family members listen. And I feel bad that they're finding out this way. But the truth is, I didn't know until last year. And it sat with me and it sat with me. And I thought, did I go through that? Or am I making this up? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Because any other pregnancy, I wasn't checked. And when I was, it was the first one. And it was usually like the last 2 visits when I was very far ahead and they were checking to see if there was any dilation because I didn't have any problems. But this one, the first one, I was checked every single time. And I don't know how to feel about that because I felt like I'm a victim all of a sudden 25 years later. 25 years later, who's going to believe me now? There's no proof. There's nothing. I don't know. I'd never even checked. And when I realized it, I thought to myself, I wish I would have gone on for the rest of my life not knowing this, not realizing this, because now I'm a victim of sexual abuse by the hands of a doctor, somebody that I trusted. Before, everything was fine. Now it's not. Why am I speaking about it now? I don't know. I don't know why now. I guess because if you don't talk about it, because I didn't know back then until the story on the gymnastics doctor broke, I didn't know that had happened to me. And if someone's out there and it's happening to you and you don't know it, you don't know what the difference is. The difference is that they don't check you that many times unless they're checking your cervix to make sure that it's still closed in case you're having a high-risk pregnancy, in case there's something wrong with the cervix. And if they're checking you that many times, there needs to be another person, a nurse in the room, and they need to be wearing gloves. I did feel stupid and I felt naive, but I can't blame myself. I can't blame myself for something that I didn't know. I trusted somebody and they took advantage of that trust. They took advantage of my youth. They took advantage of me being naive and young. And that's one of the many reasons why I have such high mistrust or distrust of doctors. And I know not all doctors are the same. I know that there's a lot of great ones, but there's also a lot of shitty ones out there that you need to look out for that I wish I would have known. Anyway, that's my story, and I hope it ends there.